Well, Piers Morgan officially blocked me on Twitter the other day. That's going to be the top story here for American Advocates, episode 19. I'll break down the interaction I had with him on Twitter, the tweet that caused him to block me. It really wasn't much of an interaction, but it is a hilarious tweet nonetheless. And it points to a much larger problem, in all honesty. I think it just goes to show there truly is a generational divide occurring, and the boomers don't understand it, and they're frustrated. And they think everything that they're seeing on social media is trolling and harassment, when in actuality, it's a symptom of a fracture in our society. It's a symptom of the older generations losing control. I'll cover all that. And first, addressing your comments under my community poll, should President Donald Trump legalize marijuana? We'll take a look at the poll results, some of the closest results on any poll I've posted to date. A very mixed response. And then the Epstein debacle continues. It's starting to look like the Trump administration is holding on beyond the deadline without a care in the world. Pam Bondi at the center of it all. I'm going to cover her, the train wreck that she's been, as well as what the Democrats preemptively released for us. I'm going to go over an entire article showing some very, very revealing photos and damning evidence that might just prove Pam Bondi is an absolute fucking liar. Stay tuned for all of that right here, right now on American Advocates. I wound up putting up a poll on my community tab after seeing this Harry Enten report. I love this guy. He comes out with some great data, and he was proposing the political argument on behalf of President Donald Trump that it would be very popular for Trump to legalize marijuana. And it, of course, got me thinking, is that the right step for society and for America in general?
Yeah, this would be some of the best politics that Donald Trump has done in a long period of time if, in fact, the U.S. decides to reschedule marijuana. Why do I say this? Take a look here. Say marijuana should be legal. Look at the time span and look at how much higher and higher and higher favoring Americans have in terms of legalizing marijuana. Look at this. In 1969, it was just 12%. In 85, 23%. 20 years ago, it was 36%. Look at this, nearly double from where we were just 20 years ago in terms of the percentage of Americans who say that marijuana should in fact be legalized in the country. 64%, 2 in 3 Americans. You rarely get 2 in 3 Americans to agree on anything, but they do in fact agree that marijuana should be legal. So the chance that the U.S. reschedules marijuana before the end of Trump's term, look at this, 88%. I think that makes a lot of sense when the President of the United States says that he's strongly, or was it very strongly?
Very strongly.
Very strongly, very strong words from the President, very strongly considering rescheduling marijuana. At this point, it looks like about 9 in 10 of those who are putting their money where their mouth is say it will happen before the end of Trump's term.
Now, perhaps I'm just a little old school, but I'm going to state my opinion up front on this. I don't think it should be legal all across the board. I think it's detrimental to American society for us to go forward in that direction and make it legal. I think there's more downsides to marijuana, the recreational use of it, than there are upsides. In fact, I don't even buy into many of the upsides. And that's just my opinion. I won't hold it against you. If you want to disagree in the comments down below, just be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel first to help boost this video in the algorithm. At the end of the day, we're all on the same side if you've been watching my videos, so help me out. But regardless, I want to break this down just a little bit. Of the 64% on this poll that said that they want marijuana legal, you have a split in parties. And 85% of the total amount of Democrats that voted in that poll that Harry Enten was covering voted yes. When it came to the GOP, however, it was only 40% total of GOP people voting that voted in favor of marijuana being legal. So there's a party demographic split here as well. And I think my poll is very revealing of that. Because unlike these Gallup polls that Harry Enten covers or these CNN newsroom polls, where else do you get a chance to not only vote on what you think, but then leave a comment down below and have it be read off, your opinions read off, other than right here at American Advocates. That's what we're going to do. And you can see with this poll, for instance, on my channel, probably not nearly as large of a sample size at just 800 total votes so far. However, that's still a decent sample size. There are some polls that run off of just 500 total. And so I posed the question, should President Trump legalize marijuana nationwide in America? And 48% were in favor and said, yes, it doesn't harm anyone, whereas 53% voted no, it is a degenerate activity. And I want to go over some of your comments right here on this poll. We're going to cover the top ones. And I'm going to address a few of them up front in one fell swoop because you'll start to see a common theme here. And that theme is, of course, people justifying why they think weed is safe and not detrimental to society. So you see comments like this by It Isn't Truly Me, 3216. Weed is safer than alcohol. Waxy rocks me. Marijuana is far less harmful than alcohol. Dom Donofrio, 7974. 100 times better than alcohol. And here's the thing. I'm not going to completely disagree with that, but I think there's a lot of valid arguments that you can make when it comes to legalizing marijuana and how that would be, in fact, a detriment to society. Now, what we have with alcohol is obviously it's a legal substance that you can consume so long as you're of the appropriate age, and it does lead to negative consequences. We see devastating drunk driver crash related incidents that causes fatalities every year, and we also see people making absolute buffoons of themselves, sometimes accidentally getting killed, doing stupid and reckless stuff while they're drunk, other times doing other stupid and reckless stuff. Some people don't handle their liquor well. They get angry and violent, and they break out into fights, and then they get arrested, and they ruin their lives. And so certainly alcohol is not great. But let's also be honest about the effects of marijuana, because this is a very common misnomer in society that I'm honestly very sick and tired of hearing about. All of the people on the self-medication side of the aisle who want to sit and tell you that God created marijuana. It's a plant. It's medicinal, therefore. And so smoking it is perfectly acceptable. And the fact of the matter is, you lose right away when you have to acknowledge the delivery method of marijuana. The primary delivery method, of course, which is smoking. Smoking damages your lungs. Smoking builds up tar in your lungs. Smoking can lead to an increased chance of lung cancer. And I will say in marijuana's defense, according to the research I've done, you have a higher chance of developing lung cancer if you smoke tobacco as opposed to smoking marijuana. But nevertheless, you're not doing your lungs any favor. You can develop chronic cough. Everybody knows that guy that's a weed enthusiast who literally is talking like like this in between every couple of sentences because they have a chronic cough from smoking so much. It's not good. And you have an increased risk of getting bronchitis as well from smoking marijuana. So let's not fool ourselves here, even with just the physical toll that marijuana consumption can take on your body. And I've even heard occasionally a few delusional arguments. Well, there's other ways to do it. I mean, have you ever heard of a pot brownie? Don't gaslight me. I don't know anybody who literally only consumes marijuana through the form of a brownie that they take the time to bake a couple of times a week. That's a lot of work. And if we're all being honest with ourselves here, people who decide to get high off of marijuana don't have the patience or discipline to continually and perpetually bake off batches of brownies every week so that they can do it the healthier way without destroying their lungs. They're just going to roll up a joint and they're going to smoke. That's what people do. And that leads me to my next point as well. This may be a minor detriment on society, but I can't fucking stand the smell of marijuana. It's disgusting. And I think you'll see in the comments here, I remember briefly reading some of them, people share that sentiment. It's disgusting and it's not courteous. The one thing that people who come home and drink a glass of wine or chug a couple of beers after a hard days of work have over somebody who rolls a joint and smokes after a hard days of work is the fact that I don't know if my neighbors are chugging down a couple of beers before passing out on the couch watching television on a Friday night. But you almost instantly know when someone has rolled a joint. It smells like fresh cut grass mixed with the most putrid skunk imaginable. I despise that smell. It's disgusting. It gives me a headache. And I've never smoked, so that's why I've never learned to like the smell, I guess. But I never smoked, I never will smoke, and I find it a nasty habit, to be honest with you. And the thing is, there's a lot of reports out there that back me when it comes to the fact that weed being perfectly safe, for instance, is overrated. This is from NIH.gov, and you can see the title of the article is Cannabis and Mental Illness, and the conclusions that they come to in this article, we'll skip right to the fun part. Having a psychiatric disorder further complicates this as the initial positive reinforcement received and the later withdrawal alleviation may mask itself as self-medication. The reality, however, is that the perception of self-medicating one's mental illness with cannabis is common in mentally ill patients. The evidence thus far supports more harmful effects of recreational cannabis use on mental illness rather than therapeutic. The high prevalence of cannabis users' self-reported therapeutic effects, however, creates a paradox that has negatively influenced societal and political perspectives, as well as contributed to polarized views on cannabis. And so that's the thing, is literally if you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And that's kind of what's happened in society, where people just have heard this so much, and in their head they're able to somewhat rationalize with the logic of a marijuana enthusiast who says to them, well, it's a plant, right? So it's natural. And so then they go, yeah, that's true. And then the person goes, well, every time I smoke it, I feel really good. So it's therapeutic in effect. And it's not very harmful to me either, by the way. It's not addictive. And so the person can go, okay, I can understand that. And that's how we wind up where we're at right now, where society is far more accepting of it. And I just don't tend to agree with society's acceptance of marijuana in recreational use. I think it's going to be a detriment, like I stated. And there's a whole host of other reasons why I think that. There are plenty more NIH.gov studies that show that increased exposure to marijuana via recreational use leads to all kinds of increased paranoia, panic attacks, and other mental health issues, increase in anxiety, for instance. Surely, if marijuana was perfectly safe for you, these would not be side effects. And don't bullshit me and tell me that that's not true. I've seen it firsthand. And not only have I seen the effects firsthand, but I also am friends with many, many workers in the medical industry who tell me and will tell you, if you ask, about all of the people who check themselves into hospitals after overdosing, which I know is technically not possible, but overdosing on cannabis and swearing that their life is ending and that they're dying because they're having an anxiety attack. It's funny because it's not true and they're not actually in any harm, but it is actually pretty rough for that person, and it's kind of scary to see it. And these self-induced panic attacks and increase in anxiety and paranoia as a result of smoking, it's all based off of the heavier and heavier THC strains that we're seeing. But irregardless of that, that is a problem. And so to draw it all back, is it safer than alcohol? Perhaps. Alcohol can destroy your liver. It will destroy your liver. Alcohol can ruin your life, perhaps in worse ways than marijuana consumption can. But to say it's 100 times better, like some of the comments on this poll are saying, or to say it's way better, I don't know that I agree with that. And if you want to continue that argument with me, again, feel free in the comments down below. I'm going to get back to some of your other comments here, though, that I found interesting. Frank P says, yes, in addition, marijuana does not lead to hard drugs. It's that person's addictive personality that leads to hard drugs. This I agree with. Addiction is a personality disorder in a way. It's a personality trait. You got to be aware of who you are as a person. Mark Spriggle says, if I didn't like liquor, they would still sell it. Some don't like herbs. Legalize it now. That's an interesting take, and it's actually pretty true, to be honest with you. You know, we tried the prohibition thing with alcohol, and it failed miserably, by the way. And so it's a, you know, there's a whole dilemma here. What do you do? And as of right now, I don't have all the answers, to be honest with you. I'm not going to sit here and pontificate too long on that. I still think it's a net negative to legalize it for recreational use, but, you know, I can certainly recognize the truth behind the comparison of attempting to make alcohol illegal during the Prohibition era and keeping marijuana illegal through today's current date. Kevin ORR4444 says, it's time to do it. Too many people in jail for having a joint while the real criminals are running wild. And I will say, the older I get, the more I agree with statements like that. Like, I get more and more outraged at the idea of a speeding ticket, for instance, the older that I get, because you really start to understand what this is all about and what the system does. And so, you know, should a marijuana user be in prison for years because he got caught with a dime bag of marijuana that he planned on smoking? No, I don't think so. That should just be a fine, in all honesty. Why spend all those taxpayer dollars to then house and feed and clothe somebody behind bars because they got caught with a plant that they want to smoke? I think ultimately that is pretty stupid. Now, if they're selling it, that's a different story. I am always a proponent of strictly and firmly punishing all drug dealers, including marijuana ones. But yeah, you hear these cases of people that wind up with lengthy prison sentences because they got caught 3 times with marijuana, and some states have the 3 times you're out rule. It's like, that's just bullshit. JMax6991 says, as long as they don't drive after smoking, and I do completely agree with that one, because let me tell you something I have heard all too often from literal retards out there. I drive better when I'm high because it really makes you focus. That is horse shit. absolute horse shit. And that leads me to one of my other points about how marijuana is perhaps more detrimental to society than people realize, because there's a lot of misnomers around it and misinformation that causes people to do stupid stuff centered around marijuana. Also, what's not talked about, because it's not a truth people like to accept, is that marijuana does impair your cognitive abilities all across the board. You're slower to react if you use cannabis frequently. You also score way lower on IQ tests if you use cannabis frequently, and your attention span decreases if you're a frequent user of cannabis. And so there's a lot of negative side effects, and people hate hearing that, but it's nevertheless true. And what happens is when you're driving, they swear it makes them a better driver because they're forced with lower cognitive ability, cognitive impairment, really. They're forced to really focus. And so in their mind, they go, well, because I have to do that, I'm a better driver because I'm really focused. No, that's actually the opposite of what you should be doing when you're driving. And this is why so many people don't know how to fucking drive. But when you're driving, you should be so good at it that driving should be second nature. And you should be aware of your surroundings while you're driving. That's how you avoid accidents. And that's how you also avoid causing accidents. That's how you also avoid hitting a pedestrian, for instance, who's initially crossing the street from outside your field of view. But if you're a pothead and you just smoked and blazed up and you're driving like this, you can't even see that. And it's just a load of horse shit to say you're a better driver. PremP990. This guy was on my other poll too. Appreciate you coming back, man. He says, keeping people in prison and policing weed costs too much. I agree. I do agree with that. That doesn't mean that I think it should be legal, though. What I will say, like I said earlier, is it should be a finable offense that cuts down on the cost drastically. There still needs to be some detriment to it, in my opinion. I know that's unpopular, but that's where I'm at. Betty Mensch says, too dangerous for some people. That is perhaps true, but I will say that is one of the last few libertarian traits I have. I've really grown out of libertarian as I've gotten older, but self-responsibility and, being aware of who you are and taking ultimate accountability for your actions is truthfully what America's all about. So, it really is on them. If they get into weed and it's too much for them to handle and it causes them to spiral down, am I supposed to feel sympathy for that? I don't. I feel a little bit of pity, but they ultimately made the choice and they knew what they were getting into. Kevin Bradley, 3306 says, how about freedom and liberty rather than censorship and prohibition? Here's the thing I've come to realize, Kevin, when it comes to freedom and liberty. I just mentioned literally 15 seconds ago that I grew out of libertarianism, and that's for a reason. When I was a libertarian, I used to champion freedom and liberty. I used to think that there was no higher priority in America than preserving people's freedom. And the fact of the matter is, that's not the highest priority, actually. It's the second highest priority. And it should always be something that Americans champion, our freedom and liberties. But the reality is, there is a universal law when it comes to countries that America must abide by as well in order to preserve our nation. And that is that the ultimate principle that every country needs to champion is law and order, not freedom and liberty. Freedom and liberty comes second under law and order. Once you have law and order, you then have established freedoms and liberties. But if you have no law and order, then freedoms and liberties become anarchy in a way. Everything descends into madness and chaos. And that's not freedom and liberty. That's not even a country anymore. Law and order is the foundation of a country. It's the foundation of a healthy society. And that's why I'm not a libertarian anymore. And this is important for a lot of people to hear, because it almost sounds bad at first to hear law and order is more important than freedom and liberty, but it is. And what makes us Americans is we champion both and we prioritize them correctly. And so that's, again, why I'm actually against the legalization of marijuana for recreational use, because it's not law and order. And it is a drug. It has drug-like effects. You get high. And name me one benefit when it comes to marijuana. Tell me one thing that smoking a joint does to help make you a more productive member of society. It doesn't make you a more productive member of society. It makes you a bum. Again, you're free to do it. I'm not hating on anybody who does it. I understand there's a lot of people out there with mental health issues, a lot of people out there with disorders and anxiety, and they feel the need to do it. Everyone hits their lows. And so I don't judge people in that regard, but certainly I make judgments on behalf of society when it comes to what I see. And I've never seen or met a successful pothead. And I deliberately on this poll used a picture of Elon Musk For those who wanted to vote, yes, it's a funny photo, and Elon Musk does smoke weed, yes. But he does it on Joe Rogan, and he does it now that he's already the richest man in the fucking world and an inventor who's bettering society, or at least trying to. He's actually achieved stuff. You are not Elon Musk. I am not Elon Musk. None of you watching are Elon Musk. No one's Elon Musk, actually. Elon is a one-in-one. And you can point to other wealthy people I know that also smoke it. But the fact of the matter is they're successful and you're not. And if you get into this nasty, disgusting habit of lowering your cognition, all in the pursuit of getting high and feeling better for a few hours, and you get into this nasty habit of increasing your risk for anxiety disorders and paranoia before you're successful, then you're never going to be successful. And that's the state of what most people are in who smoke weed regularly. They sit around and they do nothing and they get fat and they watch TV and they waste away in their piece of shit apartments. That's the harsh reality for you. Wide O, I don't even know how to say that full name, but Wide OHUJOVINY 3126 says society is healthier without weed than with. Make America healthy again. I agree. Parker 8797 says some people are responsible and are considerate of others who may not want to come in contact of it. Others just openly use it without consideration. Lung disease still exists. Hey, amen, man. I mean, at least that first part. I don't know if marijuana is associated with lung disease, but I will agree. Like I stated at the beginning of this video here, I hate the smell of it. I just despise the smell of it. Donald Gerbino says, no downside, cut the drug dealers out. This is another misnomer, actually. And I've done the research on this topic because there are already cities in America that have pretty much made weed legal. And you would assume, of course, again, this is a line of logic that almost makes sense when you hear it. Well, by doing so, you're actually eliminating the black market and you're making it safer because now it's going to be government regulated. Here's the problem with that. You're not eliminating the black market because people, first of all, have already built relationships with their dealers, which is weird, but that does happen. And then on top of it, the major factor of why this doesn't happen is the government does come in and the government goes, okay, let's make some money here. Let's make some money on this marijuana. And so they start selling it. And you know what they do? They tax it to high heavens. And all of a sudden, these people who are excited about weed being made legal are now realizing that the government wants to make money at it. And they never really cared about making it legal for a populist standpoint. They just want to make money off you. So they're taxing it to high heavens. And now you're looking at what you would normally pay for it as opposed to what you were paying for it before it was made legal. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is a ripoff. So what do? You call up your dealer and you say, hey, you still got some weed? And they go, yeah, I'm still selling. And they go, okay. And so in some of these cities, what we've tracked now over the last couple of years, Portland, places in Nevada, parts of California, is that the black market is still 40% prevalent. People are still buying from dealers. Maybe over a long stretch of time, the black market for it disappears. But even then, that's not a guarantee. The drug dealers aren't going anywhere. Teddy Dyer, 9884. This comment's going to lead us right into the second part of this segment here. He says, it's been suppressed by Big Pharma because of its medical benefits. The things it could be beneficial in are countless, starting with depression and anxiety. Just take the time to do your own research instead of being lazy and believing everything you're told without doing so. Now, in regards to that argument being made in favor of legalizing it for recreational use, I would disagree again entirely. Just examine the method of delivery. You have to smoke it typically. That's stupid. You're ruining your lungs. However, President Donald Trump tends to agree with that stance in the right way, the way that I myself agree with. Because what he decided to ultimately do when it came to marijuana was he rescheduled it from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. It is now in the same classification as an aspirin, which means that now it can be researched freely. And this I am in massive favor of. Now, President Donald Trump, when he signed this yesterday, was immediately clear he's not legalizing it for recreational use. So, oh, too bad, so sad for all the potheads out there. It's still not legal for recreational use.
I want to emphasize that the order I am about to sign is not the legalization, or it doesn't legalize marijuana in any way, shape, or form, and in no way sanctions its use as a recreational drug. It has nothing to do with it. Just as the prescription painkillers may have legitimate uses, but can also do irreversible damage and never, if you look at some of the damage that can be caused, wreck lives, and if it's abused, It's never safe to use powerful controlled substances in recreational manners, and especially in this case, if you take a look, illegal and unregulated drugs, very, very bad thing.
And like I've stated all this video so far, I agree with that stance 100%, especially because it's the youth that tend to pick up on this habit before their brains are even fully developed. And we know for a fact that marijuana consumption lowers cognitive ability. We don't want that for young people. This is why it needs to remain illegal. And yes, young people will ignore the laws. That's what they do. They're rebellious. But making it illegal still creates a barrier that prevents some people from doing it. People who actually want to obey the law will decide to not do marijuana. That is how it works. It doesn't deter everybody, but it will deter some people. And that's what makes keeping it illegal worth it. Now, this was President Donald Trump being clear on just exactly what he was doing when it came to marijuana.
At the same time, the facts compel the federal government to recognize that marijuana can be legitimate in terms of medical applications when carefully administered. In some cases, this may include the use as a substitute for addictive and potentially lethal opioid painkillers, and they cause tremendous problems. This can do it in a much lesser way, can make people feel much better that are living through tremendous pain and problems.
And that is ultimately true. I've seen the research done on cannabis when it comes to dealing with pain, for instance, and treating people with a lot of pain, especially people who may be on their deathbeds. Sad stuff, and it's very beneficial in that regard. We already know that. What we don't know and are going to uncover now going forward will perhaps be even more fascinating, though. And a lot of the doctors that were in the Oval Office while Trump was signing this and declaring this rescheduling of marijuana to Schedule 3 we're confirming this.
I'll add my vote of thanks, Mr. President. I never really thought this day would come. I met a patient about 20 years ago, a retired professor named Elizabeth, who came to my clinic. She was dying of pancreatic cancer, and she asked me then whether cannabis might help her. And I said no, because that's what I learned in medical school. She reached into her briefcase, took out a 3-inch tall stack of articles, put them down on my desk, and said, "Really, doctor? You should read these. You might learn something." And I did read those articles, every single one, and found a bunch more. And I did learn something. I learned that there actually is some medical benefit to cannabis that I had not anticipated, never heard about in medical school. Second, I learned that there was a lot we don't know. And third, I learned it's really, really, really difficult to do high-quality, randomized controlled trials of a substance that's federally illegal. This rescheduling has the potential to change all of that.
And so ultimately, and thankfully, President Donald Trump made the right decision in what to do in regards to marijuana and how it fits in our American society. It's still not legal for recreational use, so bravo. However, it is now much easier to study, and no doubt that will yield amazing results for us medically going forward in the future. Who knows? It might wind up being one of the new leading cures of cancer. I mean, I've heard doctors talk about CBD and cancer. And so it's just like, I can't wait to see what they uncover. And I think this was a massive Trump W, which he needs a lot more of. He's really been dropping the ball lately, but with this one, he really did get the W. It really was a great choice. That's how I feel about it all across the board. Let me know what your thoughts and opinions are in the comments down below. I'm going to move on to the second segment here, which will not be all sunshine and rainbows like this one was, because today is the deadline for the dreaded Epstein Files release. The Full Transparency Act that President Trump himself signed stated that the deadline for the DOJ, headed up by Pam Bondi, was today, Friday, December 19th. It all is supposed to be made public by 11:59 p.m. And articles are already coming out speculating and almost confirming that the DOJ, in fact, will not be releasing all of the files. They'll probably actually only be releasing a handful of stuff. You can see here it says the Justice Department will not meet the Friday deadline to release all its Epstein files. Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General to Pam Bondi, said the Justice Department would not release all of its files relating to Jeffrey Epstein by Friday, the congressionally mandated deadline. And that is quoted from New York Times. And at this point, it is completely unacceptable. I've been calling on this channel for that bitch, Pam Bondi, to be fired since, I don't know, April May. She's been doing a terrible job, and it's not just incompetence. I started adopting this stance after August. I've shared this story before where internally I told myself, if Pam Bondi didn't yield one single deep state arrest and begin prosecution on any of the corrupt Democrats that we know are out there getting away with it to this day, that I would completely abandon ship and go full criticism mode on her ass. And guess what? August passed with no results. And so here we are, 17 days in. Not a single deep state arrest and not a single shred of the Epstein Files has been released to us by the DOJ or by the Republican side of the aisle, which is even more tragic. And Pam Bondi and her DOJ had 30 days since the time that President Donald Trump signed the Epstein Transparency Act into effect to gather all of it and release it. This is not hard what we're asking for, what we're demanding, by the way, as we the people. It's really not a tough ask. Just put it all out there. We'll discriminately go through it and sort it out, since apparently the DOJ is incapable of doing so. And the more research I did on this, the more outraged I've become, because while the DOJ is going to come up short and not release all of the Epstein Files today, which some people are saying is illegal and violates terms in a way that Pam Bondi can now be prosecuted for, and if that's the case, I hope that fucking happens. I want to show you what Pam Bondi had time for just yesterday. You see, you'd think Pam Bondi would be busy just going through binders and printing out copies of the Epstein Files and getting ready to release them all. But yesterday, that's not what she was doing at all. She was attending parties and lighting menorahs for Hanukkah.
It's not even yet, but we're just going through the practice. And we'll use your candle. Yes. There you go. First time the national menorah was lit, President Carter was lit.
And you know, that is not a good image right there, again, for all the conspiracy theorists out there who, over time, start to come across as more correct or at least more on the right path of what's actually going on here. You know, I've already heard this before. When Trump started calling the Epstein Files a hoax, was literally like, what, a day after Bibi Netanyahu visited the White House? And I thought back then, of course, what a weird coincidence. But it's like, is it though? All these rumors, all these sources now coming out saying that Epstein was a double agent. He worked for both CIA and Mossad simultaneously, was most likely a deep state agent used to blackmail our politicians for these corrupt governments to maintain power over us. Could that actually be the truth? Now you have Pam Bondi lighting a menorah at a Hanukkah party the day before the files are set to be released. And all of a sudden today, the news breaks from her Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, who she's, by the way, all too happy to have do all of the grunt work for her and take the fall ultimately for her complicit incompetence. And it comes out, oh, we're not getting the files. We're just going to ignore Congress. We're going to ignore the act that the president himself signed. We're not putting out anything today. You're getting nothing. That's not a great image. Furthermore, another pattern that I've noticed. What did Mike Johnson do with Congress this week? He sent them home on vacation early. The last meeting and votes took place yesterday, Thursday. It was supposed to extend all the way through Friday. They head into the weekend and officially their vacation starts. But he sent them home one day before the Epstein Files were set to be released. Is the timing on that a coincidence too? He did the same exact thing back in August for their summer recess. He sent Congress home early before Thomas Massey's vote, the initial vote that was set up to create this Epstein Files Transparency Act, was set to be voted on. This is a pattern now at this point, people. And it's time for everyone to wake up to it all and see for yourselves exactly what's going on. These patterns can't be ignored. Don't be delusional. Put down the MAGA cheerleader pom-poms and understand that something within this Trump administration is sick. I'm not here to tell you it's Trump himself, although he's looking worse and worse every single day when shit like this continues to happen. But I'm telling you, there's something not right. And you either are going to choose the blue pill and continue to live in denial, or you can finally wake up and choose the red pill and see things for what they are. This is terrible. And the Democrats are now the ones coming out looking amazing. They're the ones coming out looking like the transparent party. They're the ones coming out looking like the good guys. Because here's Ro Khanna, who teamed in bipartisan fashion with Thomas Massey, talking about what would happen to Pam Bondi if she doesn't release the files today.
By 11:59 p.m. on Friday, the Epstein Files will finally be released because of my Epstein Transparency Act. We will see thousands of documents that we should have seen decades ago. 3 federal judges have ordered the release. As I'm speaking, dozens of lawyers on the national security team at the Department of Justice are preparing the documents for release. Let me be very clear. We need a full release. Anyone who tampers with these documents or conceals documents or engages in excessive redaction will be prosecuted because of obstruction of justice. We will prosecute individuals regardless of whether they're the Attorney General or a career or political appointee. We need full transparency and justice for the survivors. Tomorrow, finally, rich and powerful men who raped underage girls or who covered up for this abuse will be held accountable.
I love it. And damn you, Trump administration, for making me once again side with the fucking Democrats. But I love everything about that speech. And let me tell you something. Unlike the pussy-whipped, bitch-ass, spineless Republicans who get nothing done using lawfare, the Democrats know how to play the fucking game. And I'm at the point right now full of so much spite for this administration and this Department of Justice that I would be thrilled to see Pam Bondi be dragged through the process and arrested. I would love to see her life ruined. She's not just accidentally incompetent. Everything she's been doing around these Epstein files has been deliberate. It's on purpose. It's sabotage. She's despicable. She's covering up shit, and there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Open your fucking eyes. That's where we're at right now. I'm on Team Ro Khanna. I voted for Trump last November, and here I am on a Democrats team. Ro Khanna for the win. And I hope that that does happen. If they don't release those files, prosecute Pam Bondi to the fullest extent of the law. Because this bitch won't quit. She's already made that very clear. She's going nowhere. Really, Pam Bondi. Maybe you'll just have to be dragged out then in handcuffs. A complete disgrace, and we'll never get justice with her as an attorney general. She's pathetic. And if you really want your blood to boil, this really confirms just how much of a potential liar Pam Bondi really is. And I use that word potential because there's still not enough confirmed in what the Democrats preemptively released. But there's a lot that points to the fact that Pam Bondi was probably, potentially, lying when she stated that there was no client list and everything else that we were given by this Department of Justice when it came to information on the Epstein files. Because the Democrats knew that the GOP was going to play dirty around this. The people who are supposed to be the good guys, doing all kinds of sneaky, underhanded shit, like sending Congress home early, like ignoring the Epstein Files Transparency Act and just refusing to release them. So the Democrats went ahead and took all the information they had, all the evidence that they had obtained, and they already released it. Let's take a look at everything that they put out there. It's pretty damning. You can see here, CNN Politics article, more photos from Epstein's estate released by House Democrats as deadline to release the DOJ files looms. This was posted less than 24 hours ago at time of recording. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released photos from Jeffrey Epstein's estate on Thursday, the latest in a series of intermittent disclosures that have fueled significant political intrigue in recent weeks about who may have been associated with the convicted sex offender. More than 60 images released without additional context by members of the panel include multiple foreign female passports, an image of Epstein with 3 women whose faces were redacted around him, and a number of photographs that reinforce Epstein's ties to high-profile and powerful men. There are multiple photographs of a woman's body on which quotes from Lolita, the novel about a man's sexual obsession with a 12-year-old girl, are written. You can see this written on a woman's foot right here. She was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. And from here, you can see photos of him with various different people. Obviously, some of these faces have to be removed. Doesn't that one look familiar? Who's that? Who might that be standing next to that girl whose face is redacted? Oh, that's Bill Gates. Wow, Bill Gates poses for a photograph with a woman whose face has been redacted in this undated picture released by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee on Thursday, December 18th, 2025. Many people have suspected that if these files are released in full, that Bill Gates will be in a lot of trouble. And there's a lot of interesting coincidences that have happened with Bill Gates, where you can easily point to the fact that his marriage was ended over this shit. His wife has even gone on the record, I believe, if I remember correctly, in an interview where she stated she thought Epstein was one of the scariest and most disgusting men she had ever met, and she wanted nothing to do with him after meeting him the first time. I think that's a direct quote from her. I could be wrong on that. But yeah, she divorced Bill Gates. Isn't that fascinating? And she did so right around the time that Epstein was going down. You can see more various writings on women's bodies here. Here's an interesting one. Jeffrey Epstein poses for a photograph with Woody Allen in this undated picture released by Democrats. Woody Allen, another big name that's been long suspected of being tied up with Jeffrey Epstein. Here he is in a photo. We got Jeffrey Epstein at a dinner. We have some people that I don't immediately recognize. This is David Brooks, apparently. This is Salar Kamangar. I don't even know how to say that name. Sergey Brin, another random photo of Jeffrey Epstein. And here's the one that really set me off. Text about the sending of girls and a description of an individual are seen in this undated picture released by the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. And you can see in the text here, it says, I don't know, try to send someone else. I have a friend scout, she sent me some girls today, but she asks $1,000 per girl. I will send you girls now. Maybe someone will be good for Jay. And then he's sending information on a girl, name, 18-year-old, height, weight, etc. Departure city, Russia. This is the one that really set me off because if you remember correctly, the original story behind these Epstein files and what we were being fed by Trump's Department of Justice, by Pam Bondi herself, who at the time was loving her multiple times a week Fox News appearances, was that first the FBI had the files and they were being sent to Pam Bondi's office. Then it was the files are on my desk. Then it was you're going to see a lot of names being released and people are going to go down. What they did was sick. But then all of a sudden it turned into what files? The list doesn't exist. There was no client list. Jeffrey Epstein was not a prevalent human trafficker. He was just a weirdo pervert on an island. He committed all the crimes alone. There are no other big names associated with him. And they just expected us to believe this. And now what we have in the form of these text messages is eyebrow-raising evidence that should make you go, was Pam Bondi lying? Because here's Pam Bondi on the record stating this.
In February, you made a public claim that the Epstein client list was, quote, sitting on my desk right now for review, end of quote. You then produced already public information and no client list at a major media event hosted at the White House. Attorney General Bondi, why did you publicly claim to have the Epstein client list waiting for your review and then produce nothing relevant to that claim?
Senator Durbin, if you listen to my entire clip on that, I said I had not reviewed it yet, that it was sitting on my desk along with the JFK files, the Martin Luther King files, and I said I had not yet reviewed it. And if you see our memo on Epstein, you will see, excuse me, our memo on Epstein clearly points out that there was no client list.
Our memo, you know, the one that I signed at a weird hour of the night, hoping that it would blow over without too many people noticing, clearly states that there is no client list. That's what she was saying there. That might just turn out to be a blatant and brazen lie. And if that's the case, she deserves prison time. Now we're going to have to sit around and wait to see what the GOP decides to do about this because they're really just digging their own grave on these Epstein files. And I've been saying that all year long. I've been the one saying that the truth needs to have its day, that the Trump administration's making a massive mistake. It was a terrible image. By the way, it was the first moment where when I saw Trump in that cabinet meeting take that tone with the American people and call us stupid and infer that we weren't MAGA if we wanted the Epstein files released. That was the first heart-dropping moment for me where I realized this is not going to end well. This is not going to be good. Things are going to start going downhill from here. And truthfully, that is when things started going downhill. All of a sudden, there was a massive foreign policy focus shift away from the domestic issues, away from the economy. Let's solve these minor skirmishes overseas. Our focus on Israel and Ukraine intensified. And it just seems like Trump doesn't give a fucking rat's ass about the American people anymore. He's more hell-bent on concealing the Epstein files than fixing the fucking economy. He's more hell-bent on protecting Israel and the Ukraine than he is on anything else going on right here in America. And he can talk about Washington, D.C. being safer all he wants. We demand better immigration policy, more deportations, and a better cost of living. And that's a little side tangent there, but back to the main point. All year long, this has been an issue, and that is rightfully and deservedly so. The Republicans deserve to be in this hot seat. They deserve to fail because the truth must have its day. You cannot conceal the truth, and this is what happens when you try to. They deserve everything they have coming to them. And they've lost most of my support, I'll tell you that right now. And my support started waning for them the moment they started handling the Epstein files the way that they've been handling them, treating them as if they were a hoax, inferring that the American people are stupid for believing that they even exist. What the fuck? This is not what we voted for. And, you know, the behavior continues to be weird even today. Here's President Donald Trump wrapping up a press conference in front of the media about more health insurance related matters, but he knows that the press is going to be asking him questions about the Epstein Files and about all the rumored reports about how his DOJ won't be releasing them on the deadline tonight. And so what does President Donald Trump do? How does he handle it? Take a look.
And I'd prefer not talking and asking questions only for the reason that this is such a big announcement, meaning what these people have said and what the other 4 companies are going to say, which is exactly the same thing, that I really don't want to soil it up by asking questions, even questions that are very fair questions that I'd love to answer. So I think we have to just stop right here, and I want to stand it on that, and I'll see you later if you'd like, but I don't want to be asking questions having to do with anything else. I do want you to remember what I said about the 4.5%. We took 100% of the new workers was in the private sector, and we've cut tremendous numbers of government jobs. And that's why, if you look at our numbers, they're so good. Also, more than, I don't know if you've read this, came out a week ago, more than 50% of our trade deficit was cut. We cut.
All right, fucking nobody cares.
Possible. Thank you very much,
Take
everybody.
a look at this. Look at him. He just... What does this remind you of? What does this remind you of right here, what he's doing? I'll tell you what that reminds me of. It reminds me of the last 4 fucking years where we watched an incompetent, incoherent, dementia-ridden president by the name of Joe Biden continually address the public, giving us all the rhetoric bullshit, and then walking out the door without answering a single question. That went on for years. And, you know, it's not necessarily fair for Democrats to point this incident out because they're fucking hypocrite, disgusting weasels, the Democrats. They never pointed it out. They never attacked Biden over that. But they nevertheless will attack Trump over it today. And what can you do about it? I'm going to attack Trump over this because it reminds me of Biden. And I was heavily critical of Biden for doing that. And I'm not a hypocrite. And I'm not delusional. And I'm not a part of the MAGA cult. I can see things for what they are. That's not an accident what Trump did. Correct me if I'm wrong, Trump's never handled a press conference like that. He's one of the most press-friendly presidents of all time, in all honesty. The man answers like 100,000 questions every day. Now all of a sudden today he doesn't want to take any questions. Is that just a coincidence? Is Pam Bondi lighting a menorah at a Hanukkah party yesterday just a coincidence? Is Mike Johnson sending Congress home a day early for Christmas before today just a coincidence? Ask yourself something. How many coincidences in a row have to line up in order for you to perhaps start seeing the truth of what's actually happening here? And I'm not here to steer you one way or another on what that truth exactly is. I have my own opinions. Maybe I'll give them completely one day. But for now, I'm just here to show you what's happening and allow you to come to your own conclusions. So do that. And leave a comment down below on what you think about all of this. Who's right here? Who's wrong? What's actually going on behind the scenes? Why is it being handled this way? Be sure to subscribe also to American Advocates for more. And I'm going to get on to the final story of the evening here, the top story, for me at least, because Piers Morgan has blocked you. And this happened just a couple nights ago. I was on Twitter and I saw another absurd post from the out-of-touch corporate media shill known as Piers Morgan, the guy who pretended to be anti-woke, the guy who's pretended to be a lot more of a centrist as of late, has really put out a lot of bullshit recently that has made me despise him, and I've become more critical of him. And so what I'm going to do on this video is show you the original tweet that he made, my original reply to it, that caused me to get blocked by him, and then from there, do a little bit of a deep dive on just what Piers Morgan actually stands for over the last, say, 4 years or so. Really look into who he is as a person. And that starts, honestly, first and foremost with his tweet. This was the interaction that caused all of this. Piers Morgan tweeted out, "Is it just me, or is this platform being overrun by horribly abusive trolls? So many friends of mine have had enough of it and stopped using X. I'll stay, but I hope Elon Musk does something about the tidal wave of vile filth. It's getting worse and worse." You can see, obviously, I replied right there. I said, "Another chicken tikka masala post from you." And if you don't know why I'm referencing that, I'll explain it in a second. But I go on to say, the immigration, the guns, and now the free speech. Snap out of it. And ultimately that led to this. Piers Morgan has blocked you. And you know, it's funny because I was just watching an episode where he had Steven Crowder on, and they were discussing his prior interview with Nick Fuentes, an interview that went disastrously for him and has probably been one of the leading reasons why he's experiencing all of these abusive trolls. You see, there's been a massive disconnect that's been highlighted as time has gone on between the youth and the old timers, the old establishment that is still being run and controlled by mostly boomers, and the young and upcoming generations, the millennials and especially the Gen Zers. And so I'm going to explain to you why Piers Morgan is experiencing this. It's because his takes are atrocious. He goes on his Piers Morgan Uncensored show on YouTube, and it was easy for him over the last couple of years during the Biden regime to adopt this more centrist stance. You see, it's no secret Piers Morgan is a bleeding heart liberal, but even Piers Morgan had to start disavowing his own party when he saw all of the woke ideology nonsense, something that no boomer who grew up in a much different time could ever accept as factual or as a healthy part of society, and rightfully so. And so Piers Morgan started identifying more and more as a centrist. He started having more and more conservatives on his show and agreeing with them more. He even wrote a book, Woke is Dead, I believe it's called, where he does completely pretty much disavow this far left liberal idiocy that we've seen emerge in our society. And thankfully, we've now seen pretty much be squashed down under this current Trump administration. However, now that a Republican is back in control, and now that we're ending up year one of Trump back in the office with full Republican control, Congress, Senate, the executive branch, etc., it seems like it's only natural for the bleeding heart liberal Piers Morgan to slowly return, to slowly leave that centrist stance and move much more to the left again. And that's what he's been doing. And I've noticed it. And it's become more and more abundantly clear to me that Piers Morgan never really changed any of his ways. And to be fair to him, I don't think he ever even pretended to. But now he's being more outspoken about nonsense. And he's doing so from a very hypocritical and out of touch place. And what I really want to do is take you back to peak COVID times, 2021 to 2023. And you know, this video probably won't do well because YouTube is full of fucking liberal who censor everything, but I'm going to cover this topic anyway because it's time to. Piers Morgan was one of those guys, as you can see from this photo right here. I've had my COVID vaccine. Have you, Piers? Wow, you're such a hero. And the thing is, in Piers Morgan's mind, he was an absolute hero. And when I started going back on all of the tweets and pulling them up from what he was saying during COVID, it exposes who Piers Morgan really is at his core. Because I'm going to tell you this right now. Who you were during 2021 and 2022 is revealing of who you really are when times get hard, when tyranny is pushed down to the masses. What a load of horseshit it all turned out to be. But there's Piers Morgan. I guarantee you he wore his mask like a good boy. And he loves touting off the fact that he got his COVID vaccination. And let's talk about those COVID vaccines. Because Piers Morgan was one of those recognizable faces and one of those prominent voices pushing for everyone to do their civil duty and go get vaccinated. And he took it just as far as that despicable disgrace Jimmy Kimmel did. Take a look at this tweet from Piers Morgan right here, where he says, footballers who refuse to be jabbed should be refused treatment for injuries. After all, why should they trust doctors about treatment for broken legs and torn ligaments if they don't trust them about a life-saving vaccine? And you know, besides the fact that that is just a, first of all, despicable thing to advocate for. You're literally part of the tyrannical system at that point to advocate for people to not receive medical treatment for devastating injuries, all because they refused an experimental jab, first and foremost. But secondly, the comparison makes you a fucking idiot. We've known how to reset broken bones now for years, hundreds or thousands of years. I should look that up. I'm willing to bet ancient Egypt knew how to reset broken bones. They always wind up shocking us in the medical community. So for you to compare something that had been, what, in testing for 3 years to something that we've known how to do as a practice now for probably millennia, it makes you an absolute retard. And not just a retard, because that is bad enough, but a retard who loves tyranny and advocates for tyrannical measures to be taken on people who will not submit to a tyrannical government. Despicable. And it got worse from here. Piers Morgan upped the ante, it seemed, with all of these other tweets that I wound up finding. Take a look at some of the other ones. Imagine being scared of having a safe, well-regulated 4-second vaccine shot when previous generations braved gunshots for years on end to save us from tyranny. Anti-vaxxers really are a bunch of spineless pussies, he says. And there's another false equivalency for you. If the prior generations could brave storming beaches and being shot at by guns, certainly you can take this very safe, very effective 4-second vaccine that's been studied now for a whole 3 years. Your life's not at risk, it's safe. How do I know it's safe? They told us it's safe. That's how I know. He goes on further to say those who refuse to be vaccinated with no medical reason not to should be refused NHS care if they then catch COVID. I'm hearing of anti-vaxxers using up ICU beds in London at vast expense to the taxpayer. Let them pay for their own stupidity and selfishness. Really, Piers, how were you proposing they pay for that? What were you implying there? That's so Jimmy Kimmel-esque, it's gross. By the way, if the COVID vaccine worked the way that it was supposed to, the way that vaccine is supposed to be defined, that is, why were there people who took the COVID vaccine who still wound up in ICU beds with COVID? Shouldn't the ICU beds be only full of people who refused the vaccine? That is, of course, if the pandemic was as bad as everyone said it was. That is, of course, if the vaccine did what everyone said it was supposed to do. Like, the logic here is so flawed and so miserably poor. It doesn't surprise me, coming from a British guy like Piers Morgan. There's a reason why their country looks like the way it does, and I'm going to get to that in 1 second. Because Piers Morgan, as it turns out, is a symptom of the disease of the West. Though to his credit, Piers Morgan has apologized for advocating for such strict censorship. He still doubles down on tweets that talk about him during such times. You can see this original tweet from Dr. Simon Goddick, who was quote tweeting Piers Morgan back during the COVID times, where Piers Morgan had originally said during COVID, "History will judge all COVID deniers and downplayers with the scorn and ridicule you deserve. You're one of the reasons we're in this god-awful mess. Just shut up and stop spewing your conspiracy theory bullshit that puts so many lives at risk and increases pressure on our NHS workers." And Simon Goddick quoted this, stating, "History will judge all narrative pushers with the scorn and ridicule they deserve." Piers Morgan was very triggered by this, as you can see, so he quote tweeted the quote tweet and said, "You drop a thread on me every month purely for clickbait. I was right about most things in COVID and have apologized for the stuff I got wrong." And so Piers Morgan, to this day, because that was back in just May of this year, he still feels vindicated for most of what he said during such times. He feels he was mostly right. So let's take a look at it. I want to talk first and foremost about how the CDC changed the definition of vaccine during 2021 because people were rightfully pointing out a lot of inconsistencies there. And so you can see back in January 31st of 2021, really the end of the first full month where COVID was in effect, the definition of a vaccine on the CDC website is a product that stimulates a person's immune system to produce immunity to a specific disease, protecting the person from that disease. Well, after several months of this experimental jab really not doing shit for anybody and sending people to the hospital regardless of how many times they've been jabbed, the CDC decided on Halloween that year, October 31st, 2021, that the definition of vaccine needed to be changed to a preparation that is used to stimulate the body's immune response against diseases. Now, there's an uncomfortable reality for everyone who called the people who refused to get vaccinated anti-vaxxers and conspiracy theorists. The CDC changed the definition because they had to, because what they had cooked up in those labs was ineffective at best, and at worst, which I'll cover in a minute here, actually dangerous. But Piers Morgan was one of those prominent people, adamant that everyone had to do their part and get this vaccine, adamant for that second jab, by the way. And so he gets to say he was right about the crazy conspiracy theorists because the CDC changed the definition. I mean, this is no different than when we were living through peak Biden inflation in 2022, when our economy was crashing to the ground and prices at the grocery store were going up literally every week that I went there. Our economy was tanking. And so what did the Biden administration do? They changed the definition of what a recession was. Does anybody buy that, though? Are people this easily gaslit? Worse yet, those people that Piers Morgan refers to as anti-vaxxer pussies turned out to be even more correct when it came to our reasoning on why we weren't taking this stupid fucking jab. Here's an article right here. Stanford study explains how COVID shots cause myocarditis. Wow. We were saying that all along. How on earth did us unqualified, uneducated people ever deduce that? Gee, maybe it could be because we looked at the patterns of what were happening. All of these 21-year-olds who were receiving their second jab especially, and then dropping dead while playing basketball at their college. That's not normal. Of course, the easily gaslit were literally told that it was normal. Oh, this happens. It's just not recorded that often. But 21-year-olds, they die of heart-related issues all the time. Up yours. You can see it says, Stanford medicine researchers identified a biological mechanism showing how mRNA COVID vaccines can trigger myocarditis in recipients, especially young males. The study found immune cells release CXCL10 and IFN gamma, causing inflammatory heart muscle injury within days of vaccination. Incidence peaks at 1 in 16,750 males aged 30 or under after a second dose. Even Stanford admits the risk is real, measurable, and biological. The evidence was plain as day for anybody willing to sit down and anybody who could produce any amount of critical thought. I saw so many of the 21-year-old athletes, like I say, just drop dead. And it was never a surprise to me when it came out that they had just received their second COVID shot the week before. And you know, this is why it's so important to never let these times go. It should always serve as a reminder to you of how fickle and weak-minded the majority of people are. Even prominent names like Piers Morgan fell for all of this bullshit hook, line, and sinker. Not only did they fall for it, but they were happy to jump on board and perpetuate all of the lies and propaganda to convince more people to fall for it. And that is how tyranny is ushered in. Now, thank God they pushed too hard and too soon, and not enough of us fell for it, and there was too much of a resistance. But that resistance certainly didn't come from people like Piers Morgan. And just to show evidence and confirmation of what I'm saying here, these are line graphs right here, incident cases of myocarditis. And you can see in every example, they spike up in 2021. Surprise, surprise. But let's move on from Piers Morgan's stance during COVID. That was a time where a lot of people who have a weaker mind like him were susceptible to the propaganda, and they ate it hook, line, and sinker. After all, Piers Morgan, like I said, he's always been a liberal, so he's easily gaslit, and he falls for this kind of stuff. He loves big daddy government. And he really didn't start waking up to stuff until, 2023, I'd say? So maybe we give him a break on that. The only problem is, he has still continued on with disgusting narratives. I'm going to explain to you why he blocked me right now, in fact. I called it a chicken tikka masala tweet, and that's become a bit of a sore spot for him. I'm going to tell you why right now. I know it's a little hard to see this tweet, unfortunately, but I'm going to read it off to you. This was Piers Morgan quote tweeting another user by the name of Michael McCarthy. And Michael McCarthy had videos up of the massive immigration problem in the UK. Piers Morgan was doubling down here where he quote tweeted it and said, "There are a lot of white English people I would happily trade for a good weekly chicken tikka masala." And so yes, Piers Morgan is a traitor, essentially. By his own admission, whether with humorous intent or otherwise, he freely admits that he's very happy about the massive immigration crisis and straight up invasion of his home country, all because those immigrants come in with new dishes for him to try. That's how short-sighted someone like Piers Morgan is. And you know what? That level of short-sightedness is a luxury. It's a luxury that he can afford at his $100 million net worth because he lives in the neighborhoods where he hasn't yet had to deal with the massive immigration problems, which is why he's in complete denial of immigration being a problem at all, as evidenced as his appearance on the Benny Johnson show, where Benny held him to account and asked him to explain his views and explain his statements about chicken tikka masala and immigration.
There's a lot of white English people that you would trade for a good weekly chicken tikka masala.
Yeah.
Would you trade any other groups of people in England?
Well, yeah, of course
for
I
food?
would. And nobody has actually asked me, so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, this is
who I meant by a lot of white English people. It was people like Tommy Robinson and his followers who'd been spewing the most horrific racist abuse in the last 3 weeks or so. And I would quite happily swap Tommy Robinson for a chicken tikka masala. The general point I was making is that I believe that my country, England, is not fallen. It's not stricken. It's not been invaded by foreigners. I believe there are genuine, legitimate issues in our country about the way immigration has been handled. But we are and remain a template, actually, of how multiculturalism can work.
So hopefully that explains to you what's going on here when it comes to Piers Morgan and why he blocked me. He's very sensitive about this topic because he's been ridiculed rightfully so, on social media ever since making it. Then he goes on to state in the most tone-deaf approach possible that his country, England, has not been overrun by immigration and that it's not Armageddon. So let's take a look at just how accurate or inaccurate of a statement that really is. First, it's no longer even difficult anymore to Google images of what a typical street in London looks like. This is an example of what you'll see. Does that look like a lot of normal, native-born British people to you? I think not. But even worse yet, let's just get right to the red meat, the unsafe for the YouTube algorithm stats that I'm just going to unashamedly read out loud. So please remember to like and subscribe to this channel because YouTube punishes me for telling the truth, and fuck them. But the amount of rapes that have been recorded in England and Wales from the year 2000 to 2024 sets an alarming tone for what's actually happening here. It all correlates, by the way, with the increase, the massive increase of immigration to England. So in the year 2000, you can see here, England and Wales had a total of 8,593 rapes. What you see, fast forward to 2024, 68,109 rapes. That is astronomical. And by the way, I am not going to be censoring myself. I'm done with that bullshit. I'm not going to say the cutesy fucking YouTube word grape. It's grape. They got graped. It's rape. It's not a bad word. It's a word that people need to know and discuss because it's a disgusting and devastating action that should be, in my opinion, punishable by death for those who commit it serially. But I have always hated that, this notion that we can't say that word anymore. For what fucking reason? Anyway, in correlation with the massive uptick of immigration in England and Europe, for that matter, by the way, the UK has now become the rape capital of the world, where you can see at per capita stats here, per 100,000 people in the UK, 109 of them are raped per year. That's disgusting. But there's Piers Morgan, net worth of $100 million, insulated and padded from all of his wealth and power that he's obtained over his life, and therefore completely clueless, telling you, the people, his own British people for that matter, but the rest of the world as well, that England is still a beautiful place and that the immigration is just adding to the culture. And what we're really seeing here is just a dose of white guilt from Piers Morgan. There's this narrative that's been somehow spreading across the West that white people should be ashamed of their culture and of their country and of everything that they've built. And that alone, white people don't even actually have a culture, which is why we apparently need to be importing all of these black and brown people into our countries. They're the ones that add to our culture. Without them, we're nothing. This is some weird, disgusting lie. And that's why it's so interesting when you're actually paying attention to the immigration crises that we're experiencing. Where are those immigration crises happening? Australia, Italy, European countries, the UK, and under Joe Biden was happening right here in America. And it's all by design. And Piers Morgan is one of the prime examples of one of these stupid white people that play along with it and help enhance the narrative. They help perpetuate the white guilt that we're supposed to experience. They thrive off of that. They love apologizing for being white. And it's just so typical of these boomers. And it highlights the problem when it comes to the generational divide that we're experiencing. Piers is a boomer. Piers grew up during the all you need is love era. Let's just welcome in the less fortunate. We've built something great here. Let's now allow other people to benefit from that. The line of logic is mind-numbingly stupid. And then to deny what is very clearly right in front of you. Like, this guy is a professional media personality who is openly denying the problem of immigration and denying the fact that it's an invasion in the UK. Does he not have access to the same statistics that I've pulled? And you want to see something even more disgusting, by the way? You want to know how the UK is handling this massive uptick of rapes happening in their country? Have they decided to really increase police presence to crack down on the rapists, who the vast majority of the times are Muslims, by the way? Have they decided to do that? Not really. Here's what they've actually decided to do. They now arrest women who are minors, so teenage girls, for being out later than 5 p.m.
No, you want to arrest?
Let's take a look at this. This girl, by the way, was probably done with school. She went to McDonald's. She probably stayed at that McDonald's too late. It's now 5 p.m., which is a curfew for these minors because it's too dangerous for them to be outside past 5 p.m. in their own country because they might get raped by a Muslim. And so what they do here is they're now basically blaming the victim openly. This is her fault. She's getting arrested for this. And when it comes to victim blaming over there, it gets even worse than that. They're not just hauling away young girls in the back of police cruisers for being outside past 5 p.m. because it's for their own good. But on top of it, they've actually now found ways to punish women who are victims of assault and rape even more in that country. They're so hell-bent on the UK of protecting the dignity of Muslim people and of these violent criminals and immigrants that they now arrest women like this. Assault victim is convicted of a hate crime after she branded attacker a in text messages, telling a friend how she'd been beaten up. There's so much wrong with that one. First of all, it's a private text message. Second of all, the police got their hands on it because her friend turned her in for hate speech. So some friend that is. But third of all, the fact that hate speech in that country is that prevalent that she's getting arrested. She's the victim, by the way, and not just of assault. According to the reports I've seen, she was raped and then was texting her friend calling her rapist a and now she's in trouble for it. She got arrested for this. That's justice to you? That's not Armageddon, Piers Morgan? Your country is arresting rape victims? It gets even worse than that, though. I found this story to be the most atrocious perhaps I've ever read. A UK woman loses a jail term appeal after killing a man as he was sexually assaulting her. Martina Oganowska was sentenced in 2018 to 17 years in prison for stabbing Philippe to death in a car park. That is a real story. This woman was being raped in the UK, and she had a knife on her. And actually, the reason why she even had a knife on her, by the way, was because she had already been raped, sadly, once before as a 14-year-old girl. And so ever since then, she had carried a knife on her for protection. And it just so happened that years later, it would happen to her again. But this time she had the knife. She could defend herself properly, and she did. And she stabbed him, and it killed him. And in any developed country, she would get a round of applause for doing the right thing. People would be elated that the rapist was dead and that the woman protected herself successfully. But not in the fucking UK. They consider that a disproportionate showing of force. And they sentenced her, I kid you not, to 17 years in prison. She tried to appeal it, and it was denied. And so a woman who was a victim of rape once and nearly a victim of rape a second time properly defended herself and is now paying a huge price for it. People have also pointed out, by the way, that a 17-year prison sentence is so stiff compared to the prison sentences that some of these actual rapists are getting. I've seen reports of rapists being let out in 9 years. She's away for 17. That's not Armageddon to you, Piers Morgan? The immigrants aren't invaders. They're not causing a problem. They bring great dishes. This is what Piers Morgan advocates for. All this bullshit is happening at a street level. He's blissfully unaware, and he's just enjoying a nice dish of chicken tikka masala on his balcony, while the screams and cries of young women in the UK can no doubt be heard all across the city as they get raped at the hands of the invaders of their nation. But at least the dishes taste better out that way. But I also referenced the gun issue when it came to Piers Morgan's tweet, and that's because it's very fucking annoying for me as an actual American patriot to watch a British liberal who denies the realities of his own country being invaded by immigrants so he can eat chicken tikka masala talk about our gun issue out this way. And so I want to dismantle that as well right here and right now. You see, Piers Morgan made this tweet as well. He said, "I wish Americans would stop pretending to be shocked by the country's unrelenting procession of mass shootings. You can't be shocked when something keeps happening that you do nothing to stop. Just admit you don't care enough to act because you love your guns too much." Well, guess what, Piers Morgan? We do love our guns. We love them a lot, and they're not going anywhere. We're keeping them. And it's actually a lot easier of a choice for us to make when it comes to keeping our guns or giving them up, because we have your entire country to look at when it comes to future outlooks of what happens when citizens give up their guns willingly. For instance, the massive outbreak of knife crime in the UK that has occurred ever since they gave up their guns. You can see on the far right there, that's the total number of annual knife crimes. In the year 2019-2020, it was at 55,170. And these are all broken up into categories: homicide, indecent and sexual assault, rape, robbery, threats to kill, attempted murder, all done while the perpetrator was holding a knife. Those numbers did start to drop in 2021 because of COVID, and I remember the UK government was celebrating that, by the way, pretending like the correlation wasn't obvious and saying, we're getting it down, guys, see? But you fast forward to 2024, 2025, and it's already pretty much all the way back up to where it was pre-COVID levels. In London, according to the research I've done, there are 45 knife-related crimes that happen every single day. People have resorted to carrying swords now to up the ante and give themselves better defense against knife-wielding gangsters who parole the cities in giant gangs and rape groups. And so, of course, you have that Muppet Prime Minister Keir Starmer who identifies this issue, the citizens using swords to protect themselves. And he goes on his television and he goes, we have a sword problem now. I'm hereby banning the use of all swords and katanas. I can't imagine living in such a world. I really can't. I love my guns. I really love my guns. I'm so glad that I don't have to resort to buying some sort of Civil War era sword to give me a slightly better chance against knife-wielding Muslims or just knife-wielding gangsters in general. It's not all Muslims, but the Muslims are responsible for around 75% of the crime from what I'm seeing. I can't imagine having to own a sword. I own guns. I like it better that way. And that's because the moral of the story is Cain killed Abel with a rock. That was the world's first recorded murder according to the Bible. And the point of that is to also remind you in this modern day and age that where there's a will, there's a way. People who want to kill will kill. People who want to murder will murder. Nothing will stop that. And nothing is a better example of that than the UK, giving up their guns with the promise of violent crimes and murders ending. Their government said, you got to give up your guns. It's too dangerous for you to own guns. Everything will get better if you just give up your guns. And the fact of the matter is nothing's gotten better. The UK is going through epidemic levels of knife crime right now. And it's a sad state to see what the country has become. And it's a great example of government overreach. And it used to be where you saw a lot of these British people gleefully gloating in the UK at us Americans. Well, at least our schools aren't shooting galleries. No, you just can't walk anywhere in the UK anymore without the threat of a gangster turning the corner and holding you at knife point to steal your fucking watch. It's not like that here in America, and if that does happen to me, I've got my gun. Never, ever give up your Second Amendment rights. That's the moral of this story. Because as it is often said here in America, the Second Amendment protects the First Amendment. And as we're seeing more and more common in the UK, without their version of the Second Amendment, they're also now quickly losing their version of the first one. Free speech is on the decline in the UK at a startling and rapid rate. Social media arrests in the UK have skyrocketed. They hit over 12,000 arrests based off social media posts last year, and it's been holding steady at that number for quite a few years now, actually. And it's all because there's no ability for the citizens of the UK to resist a tyrannical government anymore since they gave up their version of the Second Amendment. I personally have been following the amount of free speech-related arrests happening in the UK for years now, and some of the reasons why they've been arrested are so absurd. Take a look at this right here. Social media speech arrested in the UK. By the way, they hilariously compare it to China to show you that you actually are more free in China right now than the UK. People in the UK are being arrested for leaving negative reviews online. It's being considered harassment. People in the UK are being arrested for sharing memes of UK political figures that are considered offensive. A man was arrested for leaving a sarcastic reply under a post from one of the police department's social media pages. According to the police, he wasted police time and was under arrest for it because reading his comment wasted police time. It's funny, but it's really not. And it's not going to get better over in the UK. In fact, their entire justice system is getting worse. Take a look at what just happened recently over there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to do my best to get an answer, but I'm not sure I'm going to get one based on the two we've just heard. Without any kind of mandate, the government wants to do away with jury trials, and it wants to extend the powers of magistrates to sentence people for up to 2 years without any right to appeal, conviction or sentence. Can she confirm that last year, of 5,000 cases appealed from magistrates' courts, more than 40% were upheld? Is it the government's policy to simply live with this number of miscarriages of justice?
This is what happens when you give up your guns. They arrest you for social media posts. They flood your nation with immigrants. They blatantly tolerate crime that immigrants commit on native-born British people. They blame the victims and arrest female minors for being out past a curfew that's been established, all because she wanted to get McDonald's. And then on top of that, the government now moves to make the law system there even more tyrannical. getting rid of juries and increasing magistrate power to now hold people in jail for 2 years without appeal. Not even an appeal is allowed. And to that guy's point, 40% of the appeals were upheld. And there's nothing that the British people can do about it. And so that's why I love this Alex Jones rant to Piers Morgan, where he put Piers right in his place over all of this.
Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms. Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand? And that's why you're going to fail, and the establishment knows no matter how much propaganda, the Republic will rise again when you attempt to take our guns.
So please, Piers Morgan, spare us the lectures on gun control, spare us the lectures on political correctness and immigration, and spare us your disgusting, stupid, pathetic tweets to Elon Musk about how there's such vile troll comments on X and how you want Elon to regulate that more. You disgusting liberal. That was why I tweeted Piers Morgan what I did, and that is why it triggered him in such a way that he decided to block my account, an account that has 14 followers. Piers Morgan is running from reality. He's a boomer with the typical boomer ideology of sticking his head in the sand and ignoring all of the problems with modern society, all the problems that the boomers allowed to happen under their watch, mind you. The West is falling, the boomers are to blame, and Piers Morgan doesn't want to accept any of it. So much so that he's willing to block anybody who challenges him on it. He runs a show called Piers Morgan Uncensored, but it turns out he loves censorship, and he favors using it when it comes to protecting his sunshine and rainbow delusional false realities. Thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to American Advocates for more.